Okay, so we're so excited to have Dakota Younger with us today. And just as a reminder, this webinar is eligible for 0.75 SHRM PDC credits, and we will get those to you as well. Thank you for attending today. And as another reminder, every second Wednesday of the month, we hold these webinars, and just love to have you guys on. Again, I saw Crystal last month, and so thanks for being here again, and so excited for you guys to learn more from Dakota today. So I wanted to share a little bit about him. Dakota Younger is the founder and CEO of Boon, where he helps companies hire faster and more effectively through modern referral hiring. He has a background in recruiting, sales, and growth, and has spent his career building talent solutions that connect employers with high-quality candidates in smarter, more engaging ways. And we're going to hear more all about that. And just this is that reminder again. So webinar next month, second Wednesday, and the SHRM credits. Okay, so we'll go ahead and pass this on to Dakota. I'm just gonna transfer control to you. There you go.
Awesome. Promise I will not abuse it. All right, let's see. How do I share? I'm not quite. Oh, here we go. Cool.
Bottom, yeah. And we'll end right at 11:45. We know you all have things that you got to get to, but we're so excited. Thank you, Dakota.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. So I think we're sharing. Are you able to see the full presentation screen? Is that right? Are you guys able to see that?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm really excited to be able to kind of cover this today. Talking with Mobrium, they help with communicating with and establishing the brand and messaging with external team members and potential hires and all of that, and the importance of that. And so we saw a lot of synergy with that and referrals. And when I was talking with Matt over at Mobrium in terms of how that kind of plays into what that public image looks like and how that plays into whether how referrals are made and where there might be opportunity and where there's, for most companies, the most opportunity for improving their relationship with their employees and how they're viewed externally and internally and being able to measure some of that. I think one of the ones that immediately came to mind for me was this communication piece and being transparent with employees and the importance there. I think Tom McCullen from Korn Ferry has a quote that's like, if employees don't feel proud of their workplace, they won't refer friends. And so seeing the referrals can be a way to measure employee engagement, employee sentiment, but also so when you're wanting to move that up, I think surprisingly, a lot of companies will think that what they need to do is be able to have bigger rewards, right? We need to have a bigger carrot to dangle in front of somebody to get them to do something. And we get a lot of customers that come to us scratching their head, having increased the reward to pretty significant amounts. We have some customers that will pay as much as $25,000 for a single referral hire, which is a lot of money. And I mean, I would be frustrated too if that wasn't generating the types of referrals I was looking for, right? Like how much bigger does this carrot need to be? But when we dive into, when I hear this, I almost immediately I can diagnose, at least from a top level perspective, what the issue is. And what's unfortunate is we see, even though referrals are such a powerful way to hire, really on any metric you look at in terms of time to hire, cost per hire, retention, performance, all that stuff, so many companies are getting less than 20% of their hires from referrals, right? That's where you're seeing here, like 75% of referral programs underperform the expectations. And there's a lot of excess resources and time that go into this, and companies do a lot of things, especially spending a lot of money to try to get these referral programs to work when it's really the fundamentals. And one of those key fundamentals is communicating to employees where their referrals are at. So just to kind of recap what doesn't work is you want to have a solid incentive, but you don't want something that is that misaligns their interests with yours, in yours being as the employer, because you want them to be motivated and feel recognized and appreciated for that referral, but you don't want them to be doing it purely for the money or whatever, or the incentive, right? So having too big of a reward, they start to override things that they might consider other. So they might be willing to forego some of that social equity and costs that might, in terms of how that might look on them. If they're like, well, I'm okay with looking a little bit more bad or not as good for $25,000. Sure. Right. But if it's a lower amount, then that helps to align their goals with your goals a little bit more, and it's more proportionate. Right. And as it's showing here, going from, 500 to 2,500 might move the needle, but going from 25 to 5. So there's a point of diminishing returns where as you crank that up, you're not going to get the same results. We find the sweet spot really to be anywhere between 25 and 3,000, depending upon the role. Now, there can be some that go higher than that for certain high demand positions. But even then, we've found things that are non-monetary that can help to highlight company culture be more effective. So we've seen things like throwing pie in the face of senior team members, stuff like that. T-shirts, swag, all that. Those don't cost as much. And even like paid days off, if you look at like what that costs the company, most employees actually would appreciate that over even a larger reward, right? So, and all of that is, I picture the referral process and the hiring process a lot like a machine, right? And I think that a lot of the times we want it to go faster. And so we're just like, oh, well, kind of like Fast and Furious. We just need NOS. We just need to make this, put more NOS, whatever that is. And so, but that's, that would be the money in this situation, right? We just need to make it more enticing, and that doesn't fix all the other inefficiencies in there. And so you can actually go a lot faster if you aren't, if you have tires on your car, right? If the engine is working, if the transmission is working, all of those things that are also really critical. So and you can save actually a lot by having a more efficiently running vehicle. That's why like an old clunker vehicle can be really expensive. You're paying for the oil that it's losing and all that stuff, versus a newer, more efficient vehicle can be a lot cheaper, even if you're having to pay a little bit more on the upfront there. So I think that's the other piece to keep in mind. And yeah, you want them to be keeping in mind in terms of giving them an incentive that provides almost like a degree of immediate gratification, but also keeps them engaged long term. So one of the key things that actually gets people to refer and continue to refer, when we hear customers that say, hey, we're not getting a lot of return referral providers, or we're not getting a lot of referral engagement as a whole, first and foremost, they need to know what jobs are open. Now, that might sound painfully obvious, but so many companies don't do a great job at communicating which roles are open, and not just communicating, because you might think, well, we do. We have a career page. Sure. That is a way of communicating. But how many times have you on your lunch break or really throughout the day thought, oh, sweet, I have an extra 15 minutes. What I'm going to do is head right over to the career page and just do some light reading of a few job posts because it's fun. I would be very, very surprised if anyone watching this now or in the future, it finds that is what they've done. Like that's their honest answer, right? We don't do that. So therefore, their communication is there, but it's not being used because people don't want to go to it, right? They want it to come to them. And we need to make this as least resistance as possible to, and so that's part of it. Is the transparency needs to be not just there. It needs to, just enough isn't enough is kind of how we talk about that internally. It needs to go above and beyond, and it needs to be right in front of them. The other piece, though, is that they need to be able to know what happens with every referral. And this is the most common overly looked piece of referral hiring and trying to generate talent. But it also applies, I think, on a broader spectrum, just throughout the organization, right? When there's poor communication and transparency and feedback, this what I'm about to say applies not just to referrals. It applies on a broader picture, right? And that is, if people don't know, our imaginations are a lot scarier than reality. right? That's why like the scariest movies, if you think about them, right, they don't show the monsters a lot or at all, right? Because they let your mind do all of that, right? Because what's scary to one person is not as scary. So, but our minds are great at that. So when people don't know the answer to what happened to the referral, they assume worst case scenario. They assume that nobody saw it, nobody cared. It just disappeared into the ether. Now that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, why would a company be wanting to collect referrals that they just delete? But that's how that works, right? And so it's really important to be able to give people these updates and let them know where their referral's at, because it helps them feel appreciated. It lets them know that it didn't disappear into the ether. And the other thing is, people don't want to do things that they feel like their efforts are not generating a positive or any kind of impact. And again, that might seem like a really obvious statement. Our brains are hardwired to do a cost benefit analysis at all times. It's a survival mechanism, right? Because you don't survive well if you spend a lot of energy and don't get any back, right? So our brains are hardwired to figure out, like, am I getting something back from this? And if not, I need to stop doing it. So we need to let them know, hey, that did produce something. It may not produce a hire, but we still saw them. We communicated, we engaged them. There's also an optics perspective to this, because people want to make sure that when they're referring someone, it's not just about how they look to the employer. It's just as much about how it looks to the employee. I mean, to the potential employee, the candidate, right? Because when you're sending a referral, most people want to kind of feel like, let me get you in here. I got an inside scoop, right? It feels good to have that inside track. And how embarrassed would you be if you were at a club and you go up and you're like, oh, I know the bouncer, don't worry, I can get us in. And then they're like, I have no idea who you are. You'd be like, oh my goodness, I thought I knew. It would be embarrassed. And that's how they feel. And they don't want to send any more referrals again. So this communication piece, you can have really big incentives, but if people don't feel like they're real, that anyone's actually tracking the referral, they're not going to feel like they're actually going to earn those rewards. And that's where also the other piece of rewarding people, I think the thing that we do a lot is go to money, because it's such a broad motivator. And I think it covers most people are motivated to a degree by money or some sort of return that way. But if you think about what motivates people on a regular basis, even on your day-to-day, how many of those things that you're doing are you doing strictly for pay? Like, even your job, you likely, hopefully enjoy aspects of that, right? So yeah, you do expect to get paid, right? But at the same time, there's other things you could do. And I highlight that because when we're doing things like sending referrals, they're not just doing it for pay. You don't want them just to do it for pay. That's what we were talking about earlier. You want them to be motivated by and tapping into some of those other motivation factors like recognition, altruism, competition, seeing their own performance improve and watching those, right? If you tie into those, what ends up happening is everybody's motivated slightly differently. And so when you tap into those additional motivation factors, you're able to be more effective over a broader audience. You're also able to be more consistent, right? Because you're not wearing out those one or two motivation factors. So how do we want to act on this? Is one, obviously make the roles more visible. Don't bury them in the ATS. Your employees don't likely know what your ATS is, right? If they do, that's great, but they still probably don't even want to log in there because it's not part of their day-to-day. And that might seem like not a lot, right? Like trust me, I try to get my team to do lots of things. I was like, guys, it's just a URL. I even save it as a bookmark throughout our entire Chrome. It doesn't matter. The effort is not the point. It's the cognitive effort. They don't want to go out of their workflow because we're doing a million things, not just at work, but we all have a lot of stuff going on in our minds and our personal lives. Like, all of that factors into it, and they just don't want to go out of their way, right? They're not thinking about it. A lot of times it's not even not even a conscious thought, right? So put the jobs where they are. So with Boon, what we do is we post them, and we have an automation that will post it in their Slack channel, right? And both shared channels and directly, and we curate them for individuals. We also have a weekly roundup that goes out. It's an email. It's a curated email that highlights different jobs and they're relevant to the individuals, right? We'll look at their title, their location, that kind of thing. And that way they don't have to go out of their way to go view these jobs. They're being presented to them, and not even just in a broad spectrum, although that's better than nothing, right? We are tailoring them to each individual. And the mobile piece is important also, because we think about the different audience that you're engaging with. We work with a lot of frontline teams. And so if you're going to do that, email may not be the most effective way, which is also why we have that weekly roundup on our end to go out via SMS. It's a link to a page that they can view. But that way they're able to get it. If that's how they communicate, they're able to get it on that method. And that's a growing, obviously a more popular method for a lot of different industries and roles. And again, I say roles because that might vary throughout your organization. There might be certain roles where they're more, desk oriented, others that are more frontline oriented, and you need a system that can accommodate both. But again, not just for referrals, but we're talking, I think, company-wide. When you have this communication, it's great to have a newsletter, but if you have something that can also be sent out, even if the newsletter, like I said, is rendered on a web page, but you can send the link via SMS, people appreciate recognizing their preferred medium of communication. And also letting people know what an ideal candidate looks like is a really helpful part. And that's part of the recognition piece though as well. So if you can give shout outs to people saying, hey, thanks for this referral, this is exactly what we're looking for. But also when they can see that traction going through that pipeline, and they can see where those candidates are at in process, that also helps to give them an idea of what the ideal candidate looks like, because they'll start to recognize common themes. But that can also come through in the feedback. Right? If you see something like someone's sending referrals, especially direct referrals to people, and they're not hitting the mark, you can let them know, hey, this is, we're getting a lot of candidates like this, but we're really looking for people that have more of this. People appreciate that feedback more often than not, because then they're able to take action on that. If there's no, information whatsoever, it's really hard to improve. It's kind of like closing your eye. It's like trying to shoot at something, but closing your eyes and just shooting, like you have no idea where those are landing. Right. And then if you can let them know where their referrals are at in relatively real time, it doesn't real time. I would put more of like an asterisk. It doesn't need to be like I send a referral, I get an update in 30 seconds, but should be within minutes, at least confirming that I got that you received that referral and that it's being tracked. I kind of already touched on this up here, but when a referral's in a fit, people still see that as a positive experience. We found when we were doing polling that even if their referrals aren't hired, they still will consider that a positive engagement, positive experience if they heard back, and especially if they got any kind of details as to why, versus if it was dead silence. So even if it's not the ideal outcome, they still appreciate that communication and being shared that insight. Because it shows that, hey, we recognize that you put time and effort into this, and so we're putting our time and effort. But having a system that can do all of this, and this is why we on our end integrate with like the ATS or the HRIS, so that the recruitment team doesn't actually have to do anything. So if you can have integrations and things to streamline this so that it's not an additional task, a manual task for your team to do, not surprisingly, you'll see that happens a lot more frequently, because people aren't having to do it, right? It's not a task on their to-do list throughout the day, and they're not having to update their day-to-day workflow to be able to support this. Because again, it's not like people don't want to do this, but they're busy, right? And so really it's more about getting that and adding that task as a new habit. That's the challenging part, because it needs to be obviously consistent to build that habit. And that's where it's challenging for most people, even for the things they want to do. So what communication looked like for making employees like a partner in hiring is, again, proactively reaching out. Don't just rely on those, the career pages, people going in to read those. That's not going to happen. If you can personalize those notifications, if you can tailor openings and content and updates to the individual, and tailoring can be with the actual information that you're sharing, but also the medium that you're sharing it in, that is appreciated, right? That sends a signal that you're considering them. And it's always helpful, obviously, when you're going to have an ask, to establish a line of rapport with somebody, right? And so that can be even these like kind of subtle indicators of, tailoring the content to them, tailoring the medium that you're reaching out to them. Recognition, I cannot say that enough. Recognition is such a powerful motivator. People love being honestly and I would say next to money, it's probably the most effective and common motivator. Again, not everyone is motivated as much by it. Some people are shy or whatever it might be, but for the most part, like no matter whether they're senior, junior, whatever, an engineer, finance, salesperson, especially, that people love being recognized for their efforts. And that can go a long way. And that's why like leaderboards, those kinds of things, recognition can take different forms. It can be a shout out, but it can also just be a leaderboard and being seen at the top of that, or in the amongst the top, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be at number one. That's the other benefit of those leaderboards. And making sure that every single referral, every person that sends a referral, every single one gets an update. You don't want a single one missed. If people are reaching out, that's the other part about this. If employees have to reach out asking where their referral's at, that's eating up their time and it's eating up the team that's having to field that response. And if you have a lot of referrals coming in there, that's a lot of side tracking that doesn't need to be there. Having automation that supports that is really important to making sure that people are getting that feedback, closing that feedback loop without creating additional work for your team. So again, cash bonuses, great. We have customers that honestly don't have cash bonuses. I wouldn't recommend it because again, it's covering that base of the incentive. But if you want to really have an effective system, have something that's broader and that ties into and taps into some of those other motivation mechanisms. So public shout outs, that counts as like the recognition piece, right? Leaderboards, that ties actually into recognition and competition. So that's two motivators right there, right? A personalized thank you, that ties into recognition as well. And to a degree, that closing that feedback loop, which is that visibility, which we've seen ties into, it kind of covers a few bases. It ties into recognition, appreciation, but also seeing their performance improve to a degree. That's a motivation factor for people is seeing how things work, seeing how them iterate over time, right? And inviting employees into the welcome atmosphere when you're hiring new employees and having them be a part of, especially if they can. Now, this isn't always possible, but if they're able to, when you hire that new person, if they're able to, give them a shout out, even as that new hire is coming in, letting them know, hey, that referral you made is starting today. Those are things that can be really helpful for helping them to, again, kind of get the warm and fuzzies about what they've done, right? And even if that person, let's say, doesn't even make it for that guarantee period, they still feel like they were involved and they still kind of feel like that they had that special treatment. They're able to provide that special treatment to that person that they referred. Sending out a generic, I think sending out a generic email what kills me about this line as a whole is like, one, it's just some generic email, but every 6 months, like we talk to some customers and they'll say like, we'll ask them like, how consistently are you? And I actually made this mistake a lot early on. How consistently are you sending referrals? Very consistently. Consistently as in every 6 months. So what I added was how frequently and consistently are you? Because yeah, if you do it every 6 months, think about it. Like if you told someone every 6, like they're not going to remember that, right? That's going to be buried within minutes, hours, right? Especially if there's just started too. If you're trying to onboard new employees, they're going to forget by lunchtime, right? So you need to remind them like on a weekly basis, at least. Like you want to kind of walk that line between being annoying and well, I guess, yeah, you don't want to be annoying, but you definitely want to be persistent. That's what I would say. But walk that line there because that's where you stay in the front of their psyche, where you stay top of mind for them. And that's when they start to participate a lot more. Obviously, we want to avoid silence after submission. No one size fits all recognition. Have different motivation factors and recognition factors. We didn't tie into this a ton thus far, but you can have additional incentives and ways of recognizing people. Leaderboards does this as well, but you can also have challenges and things like that it doesn't have to just be an incentive and reward when somebody's hired. Right? If somebody gets hired, or if somebody gets referred and they get to the interview stage, that can be recognized as a shout out. That can show up in the leaderboard. That can also, if you're doing challenges or micro incentives, that can lead to incentives Like they can earn points just for having somebody get to that step, or they can earn a t-shirt or something along those lines. But that's something that's definitely worth keeping in mind. I don't think it's going to kill the referral program if you only celebrate hires, but we see a lot of employers saying, well, we only want to, and that's really what we're aiming for is we want those hires. What you're doing though, is you're helping to reinforce the behaviors that get to that, right? Because people respond to push button, get treat. That's how it breaks down. So there's a few more buttons they have to refer. So you want them to be really well reinforced. So they just keep doing that and knowing that not every referral is going to turn into a hire. But again, that can be as simple as feedback, right? This treating referrals as an HR process, not a cultural moment. Like you really want referrals to be a part of your culture. You want it to be something that becomes like a water cooler topic that people can brag about, that there's that friendly competition. You want it to be something that becomes increasingly embedded into the company culture rather than just a mechanism or a form that's buried on the ATS or career page. So here are 5 steps to fixing your referral program without spending any more money, right? Audit how the communication is currently working. How are you letting people know what happens with their referrals and where those are going in process? Make the roles visible to where the employees are at. Put it, even up in posters in the break room, or put a QR code up in the break room, but bring the jobs to them. Do not expect them to come to that, because they will not. Make sure that there is a solid feedback loop. And I mean, you see how it says automate statuses, because if there isn't automation, it will break down. Recognize people for their efforts early and often. Again, ideally in relatively real time. And when we say recognize, that doesn't mean spending something. Recognition can be as simple as letting them know what happens with the referral and maybe including in the copy a thank you with that, right? Or having them appear in the leaderboard or the activity feed when that happens. With our Slack app that we have, it will show up in an activity feed when a referral is sent. It doesn't show the candidate's name, but it says like, hey, John Smith sent a referral, and it shows up in a certain activity feed. And then measuring the engagement is certainly a key part, not only for understanding from your administrative and management perspective how to improve it, but also when it comes to providing those recognitions, right? So that it's on both sides of it, but it's just really one thing, which is looking at how the referral program is performing and iterating from there. We didn't coin this phrase, but there's a common phrase like, if it's not measured, it can't be improved. So you really you don't want this to be a black box. You want to be able to see, okay, these parts are working, this part isn't. This is where we can iterate. So when you do all of this, what is the end result? What are things that you can get out of this? 3 to 5x increase in referral and participation rate most of our customers get 40 to 50% of their hires from referrals, just by cover. I say just because I'm not trying to understate what we're doing, but by covering these fundamentals, you can achieve it, because each one of those improvements has an impact on the performance of the referral program, right? Each, you fix the transmission of that vehicle, you put, new tires on it. Each one of those has an impact, and they compound, right? So you can also see faster time to hires. Candidates that come from referrals are oftentimes hired more quickly and not to say that you need to have a different process for them, but because they are typically more responsive and from both the outreach and throughout the process. And so they end up getting hired, which means less time and less resources put into that. They also perform and stay within the company longer, right? You have greater retention, which also means you're getting more return on investment from that employee, and not having to spend as much doing outbound or trying to fill that role, right? This cost savings, 50 to 70% is probably on the low end. If you're using any kind of recruiters or agencies, it could be in the 80s, could be even the 90%, depending upon what you're spending. It's so much more cost effective just on the outspend, the outbound spend of job boards and agency spend, right? And retention. If you start to drill down into increase the performance, all of that increase in retention, all of that starts to add up to that, where the impact on the balance sheet tapping into referrals is significant. That's why we have an ROI calculator that helps to spell that out, because I think sometimes management might think, oh, it's just more, it just helps us to tap into a different type of talent. Or a different channel of talent. It really is a different beast altogether. So remember this, your referral program is a communication strategy. It's not just a board. It's not just a form and a way to generate talent, right? Employees refer people that they trust, but also they refer people when they trust the organization. And that's built from communication and transparency over time, right? Trust is earned. It can't be bought. That transparency helps to obviously creates that confidence, not just in the organization, but also in the incentives. When you're offering incentives, if you have no communication about what happens, how do I know that you're even tracking that? How do I know that I'm going to get paid out, right? If you're not tracking it, how are you going to know when I need to be paid and recognized, right? Feedback loops are truly the single most impactful and most neglected part of any referral program when we're talking to companies. So many companies will come to us and say, okay, we're trying to get more referrals. And what we're doing is we're expanding our reward structure. And that's usually where the conversation stops. Sometimes they'll go as far as, and we're putting the form, in adding the link to our website or something along those lines. Okay. So you're kind of covering the accessibility, or at least making efforts in that. You've certainly made a bigger carrot. How are you communicating? Oh, well, we're not going to do that just yet. That's more of a nice to have. And that's where it gets really sad, because we have to help communicate and convince them that, like, truly, if you want to return on these other efforts, you need to let your employees know what happens with every single referral. Bottom line, the companies that they're winning the war for talent and that are having successful referral programs aren't the ones that are necessarily spending the most. They're the ones that are communicating the most and providing the most transparency to the people that are sending referrals to show appreciation for them. They're the ones that have the most successful referral programs. You don't need to break the bank to have a successful referral program. So I'll keep that open. I know, we need to stop at 10:45, so I wanted to leave some time for some of the questions. So I guess I'll open that up for questions.
Yeah, and can I make a quick comment, Dakota? Yeah. So you mentioned the ROI behind this, and I was just thinking about, like, all the different types of just ways you can hire people. And I did a search prior to our webinar today, and it said that referred candidates are seen as more credible, leading to a 30% hiring rate compared to 7% for other applicants, while also promoting higher job satisfaction and longer retention. So it's not just, getting better candidates that are more likely to convert to a qualified employee, but it's also those employees tend to be happier and stay longer. So
100%.
There's definitely the ROI behind that.
Yeah,
behind truly going this route.
It's really on any metric you look at, like you're saying, like the retention, the performance of that staff. And I think something else that's really important to call out about referrals is you're engaging passive talent most often. Passive talent meaning they're not actively on job boards. And as a result, that tends to be where the best talent is. Now, I'm not saying people on job boards aren't good, but the best talent tends to have to look less frequently. So if you want to engage that talent, posting on job boards isn't necessarily where you're going to engage them, because they're not looking. And so having an effective, referral program that allows you to tap into that talent is critical to engaging top tier talent. But again, to do that, you don't have to have a huge, incentive on the front end in terms of a reward to get people to do that. If you let them know what happens with their referrals as soon as they submit them, that word gets around, but also they're more likely to come back and send additional referrals.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And if anyone has questions, feel free to put them in the chat or just turn your mic on. We're happy to hear from you that way too. So, but I agree with you. It's like it's sad to say, but if you're already employed, it's probably because you're a good employee, right? And people who are happily employed, they're probably not looking for their next opportunity. And so a lot of times you're going to find the best fit for that direction.
And sometimes like a lot of people fit into this like kind of middle ground where they're not necessarily active, but they're not necessarily opposed to it either. And it's not like they're unhappy or something, but that's kind of the sweet spot, especially having been a recruiter, of where you want to find those candidates, the ones that you're not necessarily trying to yank them out of a place that they're like already ecstatic with. That's a lot more of a battle.
Yeah, for sure.
But somebody that is like, maybe they've had their tenure there, they've had a good run there, but they're not as feeling as much challenge as they normally like, or maybe the company is kind of shifted, it's gotten a little bigger, whatever those reasons are, where they're not unhappy, but they wouldn't be opposed to something. And that's where they're going to communicate that to their friends, to their colleagues, and those colleagues are the ones those would ideally be, those would be your employees, or again, you can tap into referrals even beyond employees. So that's where you can tap into vendors, customers, partners, those kinds of things to send referrals. But that still applies with that communication, probably even more so, because if they're not an employee, you want to make them feel that there is a strong line of communication, and that those referrals that they're taking are being appreciated and being recognized and being tracked, and aren't disappearing.
And I think there's a lot of people in that zone, and the pain of change is a lot, right? And changing jobs is a huge deal, but so maybe they're not always looking for that. But we do live in a day and age where people don't stay at jobs their whole life anymore. They don't have one single career or one single job in that career. It's changing jobs at least every 5 years, and sometimes more often than that. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that another thing I wanted to actually call out was, like, when it comes to the incentives, like, I think it's really important to get creative about ways to promote that. Like, that's the other thing is like, yes, communication, but you can also get a lot more creative without spending a lot, because I've been getting on that soapbox a lot lately, is like, it doesn't have to be the largest incentive and reward, but like Google moved away from this like multi-million-dollar cash bonus and started offering like trips to Hawaii, because their data showed experiences that made people happier than cash, right? And that's what I was saying, like paid days off as well. Like DigitalOcean like referred 40% of their workforce by pairing like this $3,500 bonus with a $1,500 charitable donation, which is interesting because we have a similar function. And what we're seeing that does is that when people are sending referrals, part of that motivation is altruism. They want to see that help somebody. And so when you also donate something, you're double clicking on that altruism. So you can get really creative about motivating people to engage that audience that is kind of like that middle ground of passive. Because again, obviously you want to have a spark that can trigger that referral. And then that's where that communication reinforces that, and you get the real ROI out of it.
Yeah, got to have some motivation behind it. And experiences are so huge these days with social media. People, all they want to do, you mentioned recognition being a really strong motivator for a lot of people too. And having the ability to post about something that you were recognized for and being like, I'm in Hawaii because I did this referral, so I can see that for sure.
And like with stuff that we saw that was really effective also is like, let's say you do that, like dunking senior team members, like at an event or throwing a pie, like if you can you post that on social media, or at least even use that as an image for the next incentive when you're offering that. Like we have customers that will use that for roles that they're really urgent or having a hard time filling, and they'll show pictures of previous buyings. Like that can be really effective. And it also can be helpful at highlighting company culture. So if you're talking about that brand and image, right, you're able to get a lot more mileage out of that because you're doing the recognition, you're not having to spend necessarily as much in terms of cash, but also you're helping to reinforce, this is what it's like to work here. This is the kind of people that we want to work with. Red Bull did stuff like skydiving with the Red Bull Pro Team or some other events and stuff like that. So doing stuff that helps to, remind employees and also communicate to non-employees what your company is about can be really effective at helping to reinforce that brand and help them identify the type of people that you guys are looking for.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Dakota. Are there any last questions before we wrap up here? I want to pause long enough for you to gather your thoughts if you have any last questions. Okay, Dakota, was there anything else you wanted to end with before passing the baton back over to you?
Honestly, I can go on all day about this stuff, so I'll save everyone from doing that. But yeah, ultimately, just reinforcing that, yeah, obviously communication is key, whether it's with referrals, whether it's with other types of behaviors that you're trying to reinforce. It doesn't have to be the big shiny thing. It can be some of the fundamentals. It doesn't seem as sometimes, like I said, as shiny as some of the other stuff, but it's just as effective, if not more effective. So yeah, definitely an effective way to be able to for talent acquisition and for brand building. But I appreciate taking the time to everybody to listen.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Dakota. And there's, if you know, go to people and then trainers, and then just click those 3 dots, and oh, it looks like I can just do it myself. Sorry. Okay. But yeah, there's a lot of synergy with what you're doing at Boon and what we do at Mobrium, and that we both have the belief that the voice of the employee itself is so much more powerful than anything the company can say about themselves.
Exactly.
You're always going to believe the word of mouth, the thing your friend says, the review they're posting online, more than you're going to just believe what the company's saying about them. And so yep. I completely agree with what you're saying and see the ROI behind it. And just real quick, just thank you so much, Dakota. Such a great webinar. And for next month, the second Wednesday of May, so May 13th at 11, we'll have Rodney Holt, a Chief Learning Officer at Global Leader Group. He's going to be going through Leading Like a Coach, amplifying your impact through a coaching-first leadership approach. And don't forget that these webinars are SHRM PDC credits. And so we will send those to you in a couple days, and the recording. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Hope to see you next time.
Thanks, guys. See ya.